Top tech luminaries, analysts, academics, experts, and C-level execs, the shakers, the movers, the thought leaders, and out-of-the-box thinkers tell all the Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. Something amazing somebody said new each week, but one way for you to hear it all for yourself is when Tino gets them to Tech Talk. From startup entrepreneur to visionary thinker, CEO, CIO, Chief Operations and Chief Innovation Officers, global economy, worldwide sourcing, international markets, product niches, psychographics, demographics, convergence, mass collaboration, new media, Web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Yikes! Today's business isn't just dynamic, it's dynamically fluid. Even presidential politics are about change. Real change, ready for change, change starts here. One expert calls it all predictably irrational, how our economic behavior is influenced by rational forces and social norms, how to recognize the foibles that underlie the decisions we make in our life. Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, January 22nd, 2008, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella, uncovering and explaining the hidden reasons for the weird ways we act in the marketplace and out. Today's Tech Talk will forever change the way you think about product pricing, packaging, how to understand your customer, and how to understand yourself. How, when we make decisions, we think we're in control, making rational choices, but are we? As Tino speaks with Professor of Behavioral Economics at MIT Sloan School of Business Management and at the Media Laboratory, as well as founding member of the Center for Advanced Hindsight and visiting professor at Duke University's Fugler School of Business, Dan Ariely, author of the provoking and highly entertaining new book, Predictably Irrational. Professor Ariely's list of academic positions, published papers, projects in progress, association memberships, editorial review boards, subject matter expert services, speaking engagements and invitations worldwide, as well as his long list of awards and honors, can only be described as astounding. Predictably irrational. Tino and Professor Ariely unmask the subtle but powerful tricks that our minds play on us. Get ready. You're not going to want to miss a single word of this special edition of Tech Talk.
Professor Ariely, welcome to Tech Talk.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction. My mother would be delighted.
Well, this is a very interesting book. I saw that USA Today has a little clip in here, and I'll quote, "Oh wow, I never thought of that moment." So, and it comes out, I think, February the 8th. Is that February 19th?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's terrific. Well, why don't we start a little back further than that in terms of the research you did on this book, and how did you get started in thinking about this interesting topic?
So actually the start was quite a depressing start. Many years ago I got injured in an explosion, and I was burned in about 70% of my body and spent about 3 years in hospital.
Oh, wow.
And when I was a burn patient, I always debated with my nurses how should they take the bandages off me. And you can think about two general approaches. They could grab onto the bandages and turn them very quickly, or they could try and do it slowly. One of those would create very high intensity of pain for a relatively short duration, let's say half an hour, and the other one would create a lower intensity of pain but for longer time. And everybody has had this thought when you take a Band-Aid off. But
right.
When you have burns, you actually have no skin, and the bandages really adhere to the flesh, and it's just longer and more excruciating. This is kind of the daily torture. And these debates, I was of the opinion they should do it slowly, and they were of the opinion they should do it fast. And because, I was a patient, and they were the nurses, they did what they thought was the right thing to do. But I disagreed with them, and when I got out of hospital and started studying in the university, I actually did some experiments in which I hurt people with different things, with sounds, I crunched their finger in a vice, I gave them heat, all kinds of pain that would last over different durations and change over time, or be high intensity, short duration, low intensity, long duration, and so on. And I would ask people, how painful was this? Or which one of those two pains would you rather experience? And it turns out that if I use the conclusion from these studies, that the best thing to do for burn patient is not to do high intensity, short duration. In fact, people don't encode duration to the extent that they encode intensity. The intensity matters a lot, and in fact, it's also good to start with the most painful part of the treatment and go to the least painful part. People do care about the slope of the pain. Now, that was a start in pain, and what really caused me to think was, how could the nurses be wrong? These were nurses with years of experience, delivering this treatment to multiple patients a day, every day as their profession. And the question was, how can they be wrong? And I became interested in the general question of what kind of things could there be that even with a lot of experience and practice and understanding, we could still be inherently wrong about. And from that point, I kind of opened my investigation into everything that was things that we had experience with, but nevertheless we could make mistakes in. And this has been a fun journey, discovering more and more mistakes over time.
Well, I'm sure I'm going to ask what all of our listeners are thinking at this point. Did all these people that were accepting this pain, were they paid for that service, or how did you get people to embrace the idea of putting their hand in a vice?
So some got paid. We've done a lot of experiments over the years. Some we got paid, some we got as volunteers. But at some point, I also had a very attractive research assistant, and she would just go to people, mainly to males, and she would say, "Can I hurt you?" They usually said yes.
Oh, that's good. Well, totally threw my train of thought here, just envisioning that picture. But that's and so what you're saying is that to some degree, and I'm sure it's much more complicated than this, but in some ways maybe simplified to the point of if somebody's doing something in a way, even though it may be irrational and not the best way, they'll continue to do it that way.
That's right. That's right. And if you think about it, you really have to try other things to see if your first intuition was correct. And how many times have you done that?
Right.
So think about, let's take an example of dating. Okay. Let's say you go on a first date with somebody and it's an awful date, right? Would you tell yourself, maybe I'm a bad judge of character. Maybe I don't know how to differentiate people. Maybe I should give this person a chance. Very unlikely. What you would do is you would say, well, I think this person is awful. I never want to see them again. And you will never have a chance even to learn that you might have been wrong in your ability to tell good dates from bad dates.
And this is along the theme, I guess. Usually when we think of economics, we think of supply and demand and all the aspects of things we took in the school, in high school and all. But this is more behavioral economics. Can you differentiate a little bit for our audience?
So let me say two things. First of all, economics is not just about supply and demand. Economics is about how people make economic decisions. It's about fascinating, fantastic topics like what we buy and how we save and how we make decisions about the future for ourselves and for others, and even what kind of risks we take in medical treatments and driving and so on. Now, behavioral economics is different from economics because it doesn't assume that people are rational. So it attacks the same questions that economics attacks, but without assuming that we're rational. So let me give you an example. Let's think about the problem of savings in the U.S. So the U.S. has the lowest saving rate in the Western world. In fact, for the last 2 years, we've been in a saving rate that has been negative. And if you ask a question of why don't people save enough, a standard economist will say this is a nonsense question. People are always saving enough. They're saving exactly how much they want to be saving. Maybe they're not saving a lot because they want to try out what living with their kids will be at retirement, or they really want to experience what it is to rely on Social Security. Or it could have all kinds of reasons. The economists will not know what the reasons are, but they would say, you can't say people are not saving enough. A behavioral economist could say there could be many, many reasons why people don't understand the importance of savings, while they are tempted to spend rather than save, while the systems set up for us to save are not sufficiently good. And that's actually what the promise of behavioral economics is. like in some sense, behavioral economics is depressing because it says, look, you're a fallible individual. I don't know if it ever happened to you, but have you ever been on a situation where you wanted to watch your weight and you went to a restaurant and you vowed not to have a dessert, and then the waiter comes with a dessert tray and the chocolate souffle is tempting you and you end up getting it? Right? From a standard economics, it's a meaningless statement to say you wanted to be on a diet but you couldn't resist the temptation. These are not elements that could even play. From behavioral economics, it's perfectly reasonable. You really want to be on a diet, but you're really tempted. And when you're really tempted, you kind of forget about how you wanted to be on a diet. Something else takes over and pushes you to behave in a way that you yourself didn't want to behave 5 minutes ago.
So that's very interesting. Would you say then that if you forecast it out for the next decade, would there be more of a movement to look at everything that we do from a behavioral economics point versus, kind of add that to the economics thought?
That would be the hope. The hope will be, economics has two types of roles. One is descriptive, just describing the world, and you can describe things in any way you want. You can describe things in history and philosophy, and everything is valuable. But what economics also has is a prescriptive part. It's a part that tells people how they should behave. It tells us what we should do with policy and healthcare and taxes and driving and so on. And that's the part that, in particular, I want them to adopt behavioral economics. Because when we come to make decisions about how we should design the world to better off people, we better have the best model that we can of how people really behave. And that's where I think behavioral economics can contribute the most, because it can add to the rationality all the other things that we've actually shown do influence behavior.
Now, we're really excited that Georgia Tech, through its leadership forum, has you as the speaker for the March 11th session. And for our listeners, this is a terrific program. I attended it last year myself. There's a special rate for TAG members, and you can find the information at TAG Online. So I'd encourage you to look at this. But we're excited to have you come to town, and you'll have. I know you have already a large attendance registered for this, and a lot of them will be business people. They certainly, all of us would want to hear about the work, the family side, and things outside of work. But if you hear from, many of them will be CEOs and people in C-level leadership positions in our companies around Georgia and beyond. From a standpoint of what you've done today in your research or moving forward, it seems like this has a great deal of application for business decisions. How do you address that in the book, or in terms of how people should be looking at this?
Yeah. So if you understand that people behave with different quirks or irrationalities or peculiarities every domain, the question is, what are the true motivation of people to behave in every particular case? And that should be the input for any interaction you have with people. So, we can talk about a lot of things. Let's just talk about healthcare for a second. So, if you design a healthcare program, and you might be worried that people would be overusing medical treatment, right? They might take too many pills or go to the doctors too many times, so you create co-payments. Is this really the case? I mean, you can wonder, have you ever heard of somebody who wants to have multiple colonoscopies a year?
Right.
And maybe for many things, we shouldn't really worry about people overusing medical treatment, and in fact, we should worry about them underusing medical treatment. Maybe, in fact, the big problem is that people don't do enough of it, because nobody ever wakes up and say, today I really want to have a colonoscopy. So how do you create a system that encourages the person to actually come to the exam on time or to have it? So what I'm saying is, if you try to understand the real motivation that influence people, you might be able to have a better system. I'll tell you one example that we did with AARP.
Great.
So AARP spent $4 million trying to get people to walk. Right? This is very important that older individuals exercise at least a little bit and go for a walk. It turns out that they couldn't. I mean, they did all this advertising and nobody walked. We did a little study, and we said, look, what do people really want? Sure, they should care about their health, but it turns out that they care more about not missing a meeting with a friend if they've scheduled it. So we created a little system where people could schedule meetings with other people to go for a walk together. Okay? And then it turns out that they would really go to those meetings and really walk. Now, in reality, people should care much more about their health than about not missing a meeting with somebody.
Right.
But as it turns out, that's not the reality. The reality is people would be incredibly embarrassed to miss a meeting, and not taking care of their health is not something that bothers them. So we're saying use those things that people actually care about and design your interactions with people, the products, whatever it is, to fit that perspective. Right? A program that would emphasize people's importance of walking will do nothing. But if you attract what people actually care about, then you might be able to get them to do what you want.
So finding out their true motivation and how that's going to apply to any situation.
That's right. That's right. And it's not going to be a magical solution for everything. But for each solution, you might be able to come up with, for each situation, a solution that would work for that particular case.
Do you envision down the road, it kind of goes back to the question I asked earlier, but will there eventually be behavioral economics positions in large companies, or people that can help CEOs think about decision making and what?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think companies should do two things. They should adopt this perspective to really understand the people that they deal with, and this could be customers, competitors, and so on. But I also think companies should become more proactive in doing experiments. So we have principles that we have discovered over the years about people, being confused by too much information, procrastination, the effect of influence of emotion, the influence on price, on the expected quality. I mean, there's all kinds of things like that. But now the question is, how will these things exactly play in each company or each setting? And they could play in slightly different ways. And to really harness that power, you would want to actually test it in the domain in which you want to implement it.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation today. For those of you listeners to Tech Talk, I would encourage you to, if you want to hear more, you have a couple options. Certainly pick up the book, Predictably Irrational, which comes out in February. And the second thing you can do is participate in Georgia Tech's Leadership Forum. And Dan Ariely will be presenting on March 11th as part of the Georgia Tech program. They have a number of great speakers this year, and I'm going to attend because I want to hear more. Professor Ariely, thank you for joining me on Tech Talk today.